Listener, observe the arrival of a hunger older than the galaxy itself. The Tyranids are not simply an alien species. They are a total ecosystem engineered for conquest, consumption, and replication. In Imperial xenological archives, they are classified as a xenos threat of unique category because they do not seek territory, tribute, or ideology. They seek only biomass. Every campaign, every incursion, every migration pattern points toward one central purpose: the conversion of living matter into new Tyranid life, endlessly multiplied. The defining feature of the Tyranids is their collective intelligence, commonly called the Hive Mind. This is not a government, nor a set of commanders issuing orders through conventional means. It is a distributed consciousness that spans billions of organisms, coordinated across interstellar distances. Individual Tyranids possess varying degrees of autonomy depending on their biological role, but they function primarily as extensions of a single strategic will. Many Imperial scholars compare the Tyranid presence to a vast neural network made of flesh, where each organism acts as a cell in a larger brain. This collective intelligence is sustained through a structure known as synapse control. Certain bioforms, often larger and more complex, act as living command nodes. They broadcast impulses that stabilize the behavior of lesser organisms. When synapse creatures are present, Tyranid forces demonstrate discipline, coordination, and tactical flexibility. When synapse control collapses, the swarm does not become harmless, but it may fracture into instinct-driven violence, reverting to predation until command signals return. This reveals a crucial truth. Tyranid organisms are designed for modular warfare. They can operate as a coherent army, yet still remain lethal if fragmented. Tyranid adaptability is their second great strategic advantage. Unlike most species, they do not innovate through culture or technology. They evolve through consumption. Each planet devoured becomes a library of genetic solutions. In the wake of contact with new prey, new toxins, new weapons, or new climates, the Tyranids adjust with frightening speed. Imperial reports note bioforms appearing within a single war zone that display resistance to local hazards, armor modifications, altered senses, or new offensive organs. This is not random mutation. It is controlled biological engineering directed by the Hive Mind, using the genetic material of the conquered as raw code. A Tyranid invasion is therefore not only military, but industrial. It follows a cycle of infiltration, assault, harvesting, and digestion. The end state is not occupation, it is total extraction. Oceans are drained, forests stripped, animals rendered, microbial life scoured, and even atmospheric elements can be chemically processed. The surface becomes a dead husk. What remains is a planet transformed into a feeding ground for digestion pools, capillary towers, and spore chimneys. These convert the world into transportable nutrient slurry, which is drawn up into orbit by living vessels. This leads to the final defining characteristic. Tyranid fleets are biological. Their voidcraft are not machines, but organisms bred for space travel. They do not rely on metal hulls, reactors, or shipyards. Their vessels are grown. They heal. They excrete spores and parasites. They carry warrior organisms in dormant transport. They act as both army and supply chain, ensuring that every invasion is sustained by the resources of its victims. To fight the Tyranids is to fight a mobile ecosystem that turns each battlefield into fuel for the next.
By the time the Imperium recognized these principles, the Tyranids were already proving that they could not be deterred by negotiation, intimidation, or attrition. They cannot be starved in any conventional sense, because starvation is their driving mechanism. They do not fear casualties, because casualties are recycled into biomass. Their ultimate weapon is inevitability, a war doctrine that converts loss into growth and victory into the ability to seek the next world.
The origins of the Tyranids remain one of the most disturbing uncertainties in Imperial history. Unlike most Xenos threats, they do not appear to belong to any known evolutionary lineage within the Milky Way. Their biology is too specialized, too modular, and too uniformly optimized for predation and interstellar migration to resemble a species that developed naturally on one planet. Imperial Magi biologists have repeatedly noted that the Tyranid genus behaves less like an animal kingdom and more like a designed arsenal, where every organism exists to serve a single strategic ecology. Yet, despite countless dissections and centuries of observation, no reliable point of origin has ever been identified inside the galaxy. There is no confirmed Tyranid homeworld. There are no ruins of Tyranid civilization, no relic technology, no cultural artifacts, and no evidence of an ancestral phase involving settlements or industry. All traces of the Tyranids appear to begin at the edge of Imperial space, arriving already in full capacity as a mature interstellar predator. This absence of historical roots is not merely inconvenient for scholars, it is operationally catastrophic. Without an origin, the Imperium cannot predict the scale of the threat, the number of fleets, or the strategic direction of their long-term migration. The strongest hypothesis within Imperial archives is extragalactic origin. The Tyranids appear to enter the Milky Way from beyond its rim, moving inward along multiple vectors. Their void organisms demonstrate the ability to traverse extreme distances through the cold void between galaxies, enduring conditions that would destroy most forms of life. This implies either unimaginable endurance over geological timescales or access to a biological method of faster travel that functions without conventional warp navigation. Imperial data suggests that the Tyranid fleets do not travel through the warp in the manner of human vessels. Instead, they advance in real space at speeds that appear slow in isolation but unstoppable in aggregate, because their migrations are continuous, coordinated, and sustained by total planetary consumption. The silence beyond the galaxy is central to the dread surrounding them. Imperial astropaths describe the Tyranid approach as an oppressive absence, a region where psychic resonance collapses and long-range perception becomes muffled. This phenomenon was later formalized as the shadow in the warp, but even before that concept was named, explorers recorded deepening psychic distortion along the outer reaches. The implication is severe. The Tyranids are preceded by a field effect that suppresses the normal psychic background of the galaxy, as if an immense presence is approaching that overwhelms lesser minds. Early theories attempted to treat the Tyranids as a conventional invader. Perhaps they were refugees driven from another region by a more powerful enemy. Perhaps they were dormant species awakened by warp storms or ancient devices. Such explanations persist because they offer a sense of containment. But the evidence increasingly supports a more alarming interpretation. The Tyranids may represent a stable, long-term evolutionary end state for life in the universe,
an apex predator ecology that expands until it exhausts all available biomass, then moves onward. If true, they are not running from anything, they are simply moving as they always have. The Milky Way's first warning may not have been contact with the Imperium at all, but a distant beacon. Many imperial records connect the awakening of extragalactic attention to the detonation of the ancient artifact known as the Pharos during the Horus Heresy era. Though the details are fiercely debated, some interpretations suggest that a massive signal or flare reached beyond the galactic rim, functioning like a lighthouse in the dark. In this view, the Tyranids did not stumble into the Milky Way. They noticed it. They turned toward it. What followed was not a random migration, but a directed hunger, responding to prey revealed. Even this explanation provides no comfort. A predator capable of crossing intergalactic void to reach a signal implies either extraordinary perception or fleets already roaming the dark between galaxies, seeking any indication of life. In either case, the conclusion is the same. What has arrived may not be the totality of the Tyranids. It may be only the nearest portions of a far greater mass, drawn forward by the scent of a living galaxy. The first confirmed encounters between the Imperium and the Tyranids were not recognized as the opening phase of an existential war. Like many great catastrophes in Imperial history, the Tyranid threat entered official records through fragmented reports, unexplained disappearances, and local crises that seemed, at first, isolated. The Imperium is vast, its borders porous, and its attention divided among countless rebellions, Xenos raids, and internal failures. Against this background, the earliest Tyranid contacts were filed as anomalies, not as the leading edge of a galactic-scale devouring force. The earliest widely cited stage of Tyranid interaction involves organisms that operated ahead of any visible invasion fleets. Genestealers and related bioforms appear in Imperial archives long before the term Tyranid became common. These creatures were encountered on remote worlds, aboard derelict void stations, and within the underhives of major planets. Their nature was poorly understood. Some were classified as independent Xenos predators, others as remnants of an unknown infestation. Only later would Imperial analysts realize that Genestealers were not random aliens, but biological infiltrators, designed to seed conquest from within. At the strategic level, this meant that Tyranid contact began as a hidden war. Genestealer infection could spread for generations before discovery. Hybrid populations could take root in labor guilds, military units, and administrative networks. By the time authorities identified the infestation, local society might already contain a parallel command structure loyal to alien purpose. In many cases, the first open sign of Tyranid influence was not an external assault, but a sudden breakdown of governance, mass sabotage, and violent uprising coordinated with the arrival of something vast in the void. The first major moment when the Imperium began to comprehend a new kind of enemy is associated with the appearance of Hive Fleet Behemoth. Imperial naval logs describe worlds going silent at the edge of the eastern fringe, astropathic messages failing, and patrol fleets vanishing. The pattern differed from Ork invasions and Eldar raids. There were no demands, no trophies, no piracy trails. Entire populations simply ceased to exist, leaving empty worlds stripped of life. Survivors, when any existed, spoke of swarms that blotted out horizons and of living ships above their skies. Contact produced confusion, because Tyranid warfare did not match established imperial frameworks.
The Imperium was accustomed to enemies that could be deterred by fortification, diplomacy, retaliation, or economic exhaustion. The Tyranids offered none of these points of leverage. They did not retreat to regroup in a conventional sense. They did not occupy cities. They did not extract taxes or enslave labor. They consumed and moved on. Naval victories that destroyed Tyranid vessels did not guarantee safety, because the underlying invasion cycle continued as long as the swarm retained biomass and synapse direction. Early Imperial response suffered from the usual weaknesses of a bureaucratic war machine. Information traveled slowly. Commanders refused to believe the scale of losses. Administratum officials treated reports as exaggerations, blaming local incompetence or heretical panic. Some worlds were quarantined too late. Others were abandoned prematurely, turning retreats into additional biomass opportunities for the invaders. Even when the Imperium mobilized, it often did so with the wrong assumptions. Tyranid organisms did not rely on supply lines that could be cut. They did not collapse when leaders were slain in the traditional sense. Their leadership was distributed through Synapse. Their logistics were their victims. The turning point in first contact was psychological as much as tactical. Imperial soldiers described an enemy without fear, without negotiation, and without individuality. The experience of fighting Tyranids produced a distinct terror, not the terror of defeat, but of being reduced to raw matter. Tyranid assaults were not simply aimed at killing defenders, they were aimed at processing them. Casualties were dragged away, dead bodies disappeared into digestion pits. The battlefield itself became a harvesting operation. This violated the moral and religious framework through which many imperial citizens understood war, because it implied that even in death, the emperor's subjects could be stolen, repurposed, and erased. By the time Imperial High Command formally recognized the Tyranids as a singular Xenos megathreat, the pattern was already clear. This was not an invasion seeking conquest. It was a feeding migration. The Imperium had not merely discovered a new enemy, it had encountered a force that treated the galaxy as food. Imperial understanding of the Tyranids advanced rapidly once repeated encounters revealed a consistent pattern. Tyranid forces do not arrive as scattered migrations, but as coherent interstellar formations known as Hive Fleets. Each Hive Fleet is a traveling biosphere, an invasion engine that includes war organisms, transport organisms, industrial digestion organisms, and command organisms bound together by the Hive Mind. The fleet is not merely an armada, it is a complete ecological weapon system, capable of crossing space, conquering worlds, converting them into nutrients, and using those nutrients to grow again. A hive fleet is best understood as a layered structure. At its core is the bioship mass, a concentration of void organisms that function as transport and command. Imperial captains initially mistook them for conventional ships. Later analysis proved that these vessels breathe, heal, and generate their own weaponry. Many carry immense internal cavities for organisms in hibernation or containment. Others act as floating factories, growing new bioforms from harvested matter. Tyranid void warfare therefore merges transport, production, and battle roles in a single living architecture. Within the fleet, Tyranid vessels follow roles comparable to naval classes. Some are massive carriers that deploy spore pods and assault organisms. Some act as ramming beasts, built for direct impact and boarding in vacuum.
Others provide long-range bioartillery, launching corrosive projectiles, venomous mines, or organism swarms into enemy formations. Importantly, these roles can change. A hive ship damaged in battle may later be rebuilt and reconfigured, depending on what the hive mind requires. This flexibility denies the Imperium one of its traditional advantages, the ability to predict enemy capability based on fixed ship design. Hive fleets also incorporate specialized support organisms that are essential to planetary consumption. After orbital dominance is achieved, the fleet deploys vast numbers of spores, microbial weapons, and atmospheric contaminants that kill resistant life, weaken defenders, and begin the chemical preparation of a world for digestion. As surface resistance collapses, capillary towers rise, vast organic structures that function as pumps and processing chimneys. Below them, digestion pools break down biomass into nutrient slurry, which is then drawn upward into orbit by living conduits. This stage transforms the invasion from war to extraction.
The most significant concept in Hive Fleet structure is unity of purpose. Tyranid forces do not operate as independent armies competing for glory. They operate as coordinated extensions of one will. In practical terms, this means Tyranids often accept losses that would be irrational for other species, because losses are accounted for in biological arithmetic. An organism expended to break a defensive line may later be reabsorbed and repurposed. Even failed assaults provide information. The hive mind monitors resistance, learns its methods, and alters the next wave accordingly. Where humans conduct wars as sequences of plans, Tyranids conduct war as continuous experimentation. At the outer edges of each hive fleet are scouting and infiltration elements. These include vanguard organisms, spore probes, and genestealer seeding patterns. This allows the Tyranids to gather information about prey worlds long before full contact, and in many cases to weaken a target internally. Imperial analysts began to recognize that the appearance of Genestealer cult activity could correlate with later fleet approach, meaning that the hive fleet structure extends beyond its visible ships. It includes hidden networks on the ground. Different hive fleets also show distinct strategic behaviors. Some advance as blunt force tides, overwhelming defenses through mass and brutality. Others fragment into many tendrils, attacking multiple systems at once and forcing defenders to disperse. Some display unusually complex maneuver, using feints, diversionary assaults, and multi-stage pressure operations. These traits suggest that hive fleets are not identical copies. They are adaptive variants, each shaped by the prey they have faced and the routes they have traveled. In effect, each hive fleet is a separate expression of the same predator intelligence. The Imperium learned to fear the name of each fleet because it marked an evolving enemy. Behemoth, Kraken, and Leviathan became more than labels. They became historical chapters of adaptation, each demonstrating that the Tyranids do not merely arrive. They study, they change, they return stronger. Tyranid biology is the foundation of their power. Where most civilizations rely on industry to create weapons and infrastructure, the Tyranids embody those functions as living tissue. They are not a species in the ordinary sense, but a self-modifying biological war machine capable of redesigning itself between and during campaigns. Every Tyranid organism is grown for purpose,
shaped by genetic instructions that can be altered whenever the hive mind encounters new resistance. This makes Tyranid evolution not a slow process driven by chance, but a controlled strategic tool. At the lowest level, Tyranid organisms are constructed for efficiency of metabolism and conversion. Their bodies extract maximum usable energy from consumed matter. Many bioforms possess redundant organs, resilient circulation, and regenerative capacity that allows them to survive wounds that would incapacitate other species. Their blood and internal fluids often contain aggressive biochemical agents, acids, toxins, or microorganisms that can damage attackers and accelerate decomposition of prey. Even death can serve a function, as a slain organism may release spores, parasites, or corrosive fluids into enemy formations. Tyranid anatomy follows modular design. Limbs, weapons, sensory organs, and protective structures are combined into configurations suited to specific tasks. If the battlefield demands speed, organisms are produced with light frames and powerful muscle fiber. If the prey uses armored vehicles, the swarm produces bioforms capable of piercing plating with bone blades, crushing claws, or corrosive secretions. If the prey favors fortifications, organisms emerge with tunneling adaptations, organic siege weapons, or aerial forms designed to bypass walls. This modular approach resembles an arsenal where each weapon is alive and can be mass-produced when needed. The core mechanism enabling this adaptation lies in genetic assimilation. After a successful invasion, Tyranids harvest not only biomass, but information. Predators, prey animals, plants, microbes, and sentient species all become sources of genetic material. The digestion process breaks down organic matter into base nutrients, but it also preserves usable genetic templates. These templates are analyzed by the hive mind and incorporated into future bioforms. Imperial xenobiologists have described this as a living research process, where conquered worlds become laboratories feeding new solutions into the Tyranid design pool.
This explains why Tyranid forces do not appear static across wars. Imperial commanders repeatedly report new variants of familiar organisms, adjusted to resist known weapons or exploit known weaknesses. After heavy use of flame weapons, some swarms displayed improved resistance to thermal attack. After increased reliance on toxins, later broods showed altered blood chemistry that reduced vulnerability. After prolonged artillery duels, Tyranid forces evolved camouflage tissues, dispersal behaviors, or thicker armored plates. These changes can occur within the time frame of a single conflict, suggesting that adaptation is not only intergenerational, but operational. The production system that enables rapid change is centered on the Norn queens and their associated breeding structures. While precise biological details remain contested due to the difficulty of observation, Imperial records agree that these entities function as genetic architects. They receive the hive mind's strategic requirements and translate them into new organism patterns. In this sense, Tyranid reproduction is not merely biological continuation. It is industrial design executed in flesh, guided by a centralized intelligence. Evolution for the Tyranids is therefore not a background phenomenon. It is a weapon. This is what makes the Tyranid threat uniquely escalating.
An Ork invasion may grow in strength through numbers and momentum, but its nature remains recognizable. A Tyranid invasion grows in strength through learning. Each battle teaches the Hive Mind how its prey fights, how it thinks, and how it adapts. The Tyranids then adapt faster. The strategic implication is harsh. A defender cannot rely on a single successful tactic. A weapon that works today may fail tomorrow. A fortification that holds one wave may become useless against the next. Even apparent victory can provide the Tyranids with valuable data, allowing them to refine their organisms for future wars. To fight the Tyranids is to fight a foe that treats conflict as accelerated evolution, compressing centuries of biological change into the rhythm of invasion.
Among all Tyranid instruments of conquest, the Genestealer represents the most insidious. While the main swarm consumes worlds through open war, Genestealers undermine a target long before the first bioships appear in the void. They are not merely predators, they are biological agents of subversion, engineered to create internal elapse. Imperial history records countless worlds that fell not because their defenses were weak, but because their societies were already compromised from within. Genestealers are typically deployed far ahead of Hive Fleet approach. They can arrive through drifting space hulks, derelict vessels, contaminated cargo, or deliberate seeding by Tyranid vanguard organisms. Their physical design combines stealth, durability, and lethal close-range violence. But their true strategic power lies in reproduction through infection. A Genestealer can implant genetic material into a host organism, altering future offspring. This act is not symbolic. It is a weaponized hereditary transformation, producing hybrid descendants who carry Tyranid traits and psychic loyalty. The infiltration cycle unfolds over generations. The first infected individuals may appear outwardly normal, but their offspring begin to show subtle mutation. With each generation, hybrids become more capable and more integrated into the Tyranid pattern. Early generations often retain human appearance sufficient to pass unnoticed, yet possess enhanced strength, reflexes, or senses. Later generations may display obvious Xenos traits, but by that stage, the cult has usually secured concealment, safe zones, and influence over local institutions. The final stage of the cycle produces pure strain Genestealers again, completing the biological loop and enabling rapid spread. Imperial authorities learned, often too late, that Genestealer cults function as parallel societies. They form secretive kinship networks bound to devotion to what they perceive as a divine savior. This devotion is not merely ideological, it is reinforced by psychic conditioning embedded in their altered biology. The cult offers belonging, certainty, and purpose, making it particularly effective in environments already suffering hardship. Hive cities, mining worlds, frontier colonies, and planets strained by taxation, war levies, and administrative neglect. In such places, a hidden movement can grow for decades without attracting attention, especially when local officials fear scandal more than infiltration.
As cults expand, they infiltrate labor unions, transport guilds, security forces, and planetary defense infrastructure. They acquire weapons, sabotage communication lines, and map vulnerabilities. Over time, the cult can become strong enough to destabilize an entire system. The Imperium's rigid hierarchy intensifies the danger. Administratum clerks may dismiss scattered reports. Arbite's precincts may be too few to investigate widespread rumors. Governors may conceal evidence to avoid accusations of incompetence or heresy.
Thus, Genestealer infestation becomes not only biological, but bureaucratic, exploiting the Imperium's structural weaknesses. The culmination of the cycle occurs when a hive fleet draws near. At that point, cultists often experience an intensification of psychic connection. They receive what they interpret as revelation, but which Imperial analysts identify as a form of synaptic signaling. Cult uprisings frequently erupt at this moment. They strike at planetary defenses, sabotage void shields, destroy astropathic relays, and assassinate commanders. The objective is clear: prevent coordinated resistance during the critical early phase of invasion. A planet whose defenses are disabled from within is easier to consume. The tragedy is that cultists typically misunderstand their role. They believe they are preparing salvation, liberation, or ascension. In reality, they are preparing harvest. Once the main Tyranid force arrives, the cult is not rewarded, it is absorbed. Some cult forces may fight alongside Tyranid organisms briefly, guided by the Hive Mind's priorities, but the end state is the same for all life on the planet: digestion and conversion into biomass. From the Tyranid perspective, the cult is simply another tool, a pre-invasion asset to weaken prey. The Genestealer cycle demonstrates a central Tyranid principle. Conquest begins long before war. It begins with infiltration, psychological capture, and the quiet rewriting of a society's future bloodlines. By the time the Imperium sees the swarm in the sky, the planet may already be lost. One of the most feared and strategically decisive aspects of Tyranid warfare is not physical, but psychic. Imperial forces describe it as a suffocating pressure on the soul, a distortion of perception that intensifies as hive fleets approach. This phenomenon is formally recorded as the shadow in the warp. It is not a weapon in the conventional sense, yet it can collapse planetary defenses as effectively as orbital bombardment. Where the Tyranids advance, the warp itself becomes hostile to communication, navigation, and psychic discipline. To understand the shadow in the warp, Imperial scholars begin with the nature of Tyranid collective intelligence. The Hive Mind is not only a command structure, but also a psychic presence. Billions of Tyranid organisms maintain coherence through synaptic links, transmitting instinct, coordination, and strategic direction. The aggregate psychic activity of a hive fleet is immense. As it enters a region of space, this activity forms a dominant field that overwhelms other psychic signals. The result is comparable to a vast storm of alien thought, flattening the subtle currents that astropaths and navigators depend upon. For the Imperium, which relies heavily on warp-based methods, the consequences are immediate. Astropathic communication degrades first. Messages become delayed, corrupted, or impossible to send. Worlds under approach lose contact with neighboring systems and with central command. Requests for reinforcement vanish into silence. Orders cannot be confirmed. Strategic coordination collapses into isolated decision-making, exactly the condition a hive fleet exploits. Even when a planet possesses strong defenses, it may be forced to fight alone. The shadow also affects warp travel. Imperial ships entering the warp near Tyranid approach zones report turbulence, false currents, and navigation failure. For a navy built on the ability to redeploy across vast distances, this is disastrous. Fleets intended to respond to an invasion may arrive late, arrive scattered, or fail to arrive at all. The shadow therefore acts as a strategic shield for the Tyranids, limiting the Imperium's greatest advantage, rapid concentration of force.
The human cost is equally severe. Astropaths exposed to the shadow suffer neurological and psychological breakdown. Many describe an oppressive sensation of being watched by something immense, alien, and predatory. Some go blind. Others die from shock as their minds are crushed by the psychic dominance. These effects are not consistent with ordinary warp phenomena. They suggest a pressure generated by the hive mind itself, either as a byproduct of its coordination or as a deliberate suppression of enemy psychers. Even non-psychers are affected indirectly. As communication fails, panic spreads. Governors conceal information to avoid riots. Military commanders receive partial intelligence and must guess enemy movement. Civilian populations experience sudden isolation, combined with the awareness that something is approaching which even the Emperor's messengers cannot pierce. On many worlds, the shadow in the warp triggers social collapse before the first spore falls. Food distribution fails. Refugee flows overwhelm infrastructure. Internal security forces fracture. The Tyranids arrive to find a society already weakened. The shadow in the warp also impacts other psychic entities. Eldar seers report their far-seeing clouded, their paths drowned in alien noise. Even the forces of chaos experience disruption, not because the Tyranids oppose the warp by faith or technology, but because their psychic field is fundamentally incompatible with warp ecology. This reinforces a grim conclusion. The Tyranids are not merely invaders of planets, they are invaders of the psychic environment of the galaxy, rewriting the conditions under which thought and communication operate. In strategic terms, the shadow in the warp turns Tyranid invasions into isolation wars. Each target is cut off, blinded, and suffocated. Reinforcements become unreliable. Warnings become impossible. A hive fleet does not merely attack worlds, it silences them, then consumes them in the dark. Tyranid warfare is inseparable from the process of consumption. Their campaigns do not aim at conquest in the political sense, nor at extermination for ideology. War, for the Tyranids, is the means by which a planet is converted into usable matter. Imperial observers learned that every phase of a Tyranid assault is structured to move from resistance suppression to full ecological extraction. The true battlefield is not the city wall or the trench line, it is the entire biosphere. A typical invasion begins before open conflict. Spores, microbes, and scouting organisms precede the main force. Some worlds experience strange plagues, crop failures, and atmospheric changes before the first Tyranid assault wave is even detected. This early stage functions as reconnaissance and softening. The Tyranids map defenses, test prey responses, and weaken biological resilience. Planetary ecosystems begin to destabilize, reducing the defender's ability to sustain war over time. When the main assault begins, it often arrives through a combination of orbital and atmospheric deployment. Tyranid bioships saturate upper atmosphere with spores, while mycetic pods strike the surface like falling meteors. Within these pods are warriors, synapse creatures, and specialized organisms designed to establish initial footholds. These landings are rarely precise by human standards, yet they do not need to be. The Tyranids are prepared to absorb enormous losses in the opening hours if it secures expansion zones.
The Imperium may destroy thousands of organisms, only to find that the swarm has already established digestion sites and synapse anchors. Tyranid ground warfare emphasizes momentum and layered assault. Gaunts and other expendable organisms form the mass wave, forcing defenders to expend ammunition, reveal firing arcs, and exhaust morale. Behind them come heavier bioforms, synapse units, and specialized killers designed to exploit weaknesses. Tyranid commanders do not hesitate to sacrifice entire broods to identify the most effective attack routes. Their approach mirrors a living tide, constantly probing, reshaping, and pressing until defenses collapse. It is warfare conducted as biological pressure rather than tactical elegance, though the Hive Mind can display strategic sophistication when required.
Once resistance weakens, the war transitions into consumption. Tyranid organisms begin harvesting the dead, including their own casualties. Corpses are not abandoned. They are collected and dragged toward digestion zones. This alone changes the logic of battle. In conventional war, defenders may regain ground after a costly attack. Against Tyranids, regained ground may already be biologically contaminated, with digestion organisms rooted in the soil and spore clouds saturating the air. Victory becomes temporary unless extraction infrastructure is destroyed. The digestion phase is marked by the emergence of immense organic structures. Capillary towers rise like skeletal trees, pumping nutrient slurry upward through living conduits. Spore chimneys release clouds that alter atmospheric chemistry, killing remaining life and accelerating breakdown. Digestion pools spread, vast biological vats where every form of organic matter is dissolved into raw nutrient fluid. Imperial observers report that these structures appear rapidly, grown from seeded organisms and sustained by harvested biomass. The planet becomes an industrial feeding ground, transformed into infrastructure for its own conversion. Ocean worlds and fertile planets are harvested with particular efficiency. Aquatic biomass is converted in colossal quantities, while plant life provides immediate nutrient mass. Even microbial ecosystems are processed. Tyranid consumption is not selective, it is comprehensive. Many records suggest that Tyranids remove not only animals and plants, but also organic molecules from soil and air, leaving barren rock. In some cases, even water is extracted. The result is a dead planet, stripped to a state resembling an exhausted asteroid. Orbital extraction completes the cycle. As digestion pools accumulate nutrient slurry, it is lifted into orbit and absorbed by the fleet. This process replenishes the Hive Fleet, repairs bioships, and fuels growth of new organisms. Thus, each conquered world is not merely destroyed, it becomes the material foundation for the next invasion. This is what makes Tyranid warfare inherently self-reinforcing. Every successful campaign increases their capacity to fight again. For the Imperium, this creates an unforgiving strategic dilemma. If a world cannot be saved quickly, continued resistance may only increase the biomass available to the Tyranids. In some cases, Imperial command has chosen exterminatus rather than allow full consumption, destroying a planet to deny resources to the swarm. Such decisions reveal the grim arithmetic of Tyranid war.
against a predator that feeds on victory and defeat alike. Survival may depend on denying it the meal.
Hive Fleet Behemoth represents the moment the Imperium ceased treating Tyranid incursions as scattered anomalies and began to understand them as a coherent, expanding catastrophe. Behemoth was the first Tyranid invasion force to strike at Imperial space with unmistakable scale, and its advance triggered what later became known as the First Tyrannic War. The conflict was not merely a regional emergency. It was a strategic awakening, revealing a type of enemy the Imperium had never faced and was not structurally prepared to counter. Behemoth entered the galaxy from the eastern fringe as a blunt force organism, marked by aggression, dense concentration of biovessels, and overwhelming assault waves. Imperial naval records describe a living armada that pressed forward with minimal diversion and little concern for losses. Unlike later Hive fleets that fragmented into multiple tendrils, Behemoth advanced in concentrated mass, striking heavily populated systems and forcing rapid escalation by Imperial command. Its doctrine relied on saturation: drown the defender in numbers, break the line, then consume everything. The early stages of the war were defined by confusion and catastrophic underestimation. Several worlds went silent with little warning due to the shadow in the warp, which severed communication and delayed response. Local defense forces often fought alone, receiving no reinforcements until too late. Imperial Guard regiments were overwhelmed by the scale of Tyranid ground assaults, with swarm organisms absorbing fire until ammunition ran dry and defensive positions collapsed. Many commanders reported that the enemy seemed to learn during the engagement itself, altering attack patterns in real time. The pivotal arena of the First Tyrannic War became the region surrounding Macragge, the Ultramarines' home realm. As Behemoth pressed into Ultramar, it encountered an unusually disciplined defensive network. Unlike many sectors, Ultramar maintained strong logistics, responsive governance, and coordinated military command. This did not make the defense easy, it made it possible. The Ultramarines and their successor forces fought not only as battlefield units, but as strategic organizers, enabling planetary forces to resist longer than would otherwise be expected. The battle for Macragge became the defining confrontation. Behemoth's assault reached the Ultramarines' fortress world with massive swarm landings, forcing the chapter into sustained defensive warfare. Imperial accounts emphasize two decisive elements: the importance of fortified kill zones and the necessity of synapse disruption. Ultramarines' forces learned, at terrible cost, that destroying synapse creatures could fracture Tyranid coordination, buying vital time even when the swarm mass remained enormous. Yet they also learned the limits of such tactics. A fractured swarm remained lethal, and casualties mounted to levels comparable with the darkest wars of Imperial history. Naval combat played an equally critical role. Behemoth's bioships demonstrated resilience under sustained bombardment, and Imperial void forces suffered severe losses in close engagements. However, concentrated Imperial fleets, combined with the strategic refusal to allow the swarm uncontested orbital dominance, slowed the Tyranid extraction cycle. This mattered. A Tyranid invasion becomes unstoppable once it begins full-scale harvesting. Preventing the establishment of digestion infrastructure and denying orbital control can be the difference between a costly defense and total planetary stripping. Ultimately, Behemoth was halted through combined attrition, decisive engagement, and sheer sacrifice.
The destruction of key biovessels disrupted coordination, while concentrated defensive fire reduced the swarm's capacity to sustain planetary consumption. The Imperium recorded this as victory, yet the true significance was more complex. Behemoth had not been eliminated as a species, nor had the Tyranid threat been neutralized. The Imperium had merely survived its first full encounter with a galactic predator. The First Tyrannic War left lasting consequences. It forced the Imperium to revise threat doctrine, expand Xenos research, and accept that exterminatus could be strategically justified to deny biomass. It also produced a darker realization. Behemoth was likely not the main body of the Tyranids. It was an early spearhead. The galaxy had not endured the full weight of the swarm. It had only been tested.
Hive Fleet Kraken marked a critical shift in Tyranid operational behavior. Where Behemoth had advanced as a concentrated mass, Kraken displayed dispersion, patience, and strategic flexibility. Imperial analysts came to regard Kraken not simply as another invasion, but as evidence that the Tyranids learn at the level of grand strategy. Kraken adapted to the Imperium's defensive responses and sought to avoid the conditions that had blunted Behemoth. In doing so, it demonstrated that Tyranid evolution is not limited to biology. Their methods of war evolve as well. Kraken emerged after the shock of the First Tyrannic War, striking again from the galactic edge, but with markedly different patterns. Rather than driving directly into dense defensive networks, Kraken fractured into numerous tendrils that spread across wide regions. This forced Imperial defenders into impossible choices. Protecting one system meant leaving another exposed. Concentrating fleets risked allowing smaller Tyranid forces to devour isolated worlds. Dispersing fleets meant being defeated in detail. The Imperium's vastness became a weakness because Kraken turned scale into vulnerability. The fleet's strategic doctrine resembled predation through encirclement. Kraken's tendrils infiltrated along multiple routes, bypassing heavily defended systems in favor of softer targets. By consuming less defended worlds, the Hive Fleet generated biomass reserves and grew stronger without triggering immediate unified Imperial response. This method also denied the Imperium the decisive confrontation it preferred. Imperial command structures often seek a central battle where overwhelming force can be applied. Kraken refused this logic. It made the war a spreading series of fires, each requiring urgent suppression. Kraken's operations also displayed refined use of Genestealer infiltration and vanguard organisms. Worlds destabilized by cult activity were struck with precise timing, with planetary defenses collapsing from internal sabotage as Tyranid forces arrived. Imperial authorities discovered that counter-infiltration had to become a permanent priority rather than an emergency measure. Yet even where cults were purged, Kraken's dispersal strategy ensured that some tendrils would reach vulnerable systems regardless. The result was a war defined by exhaustion. Defenders could win battles, yet lose the campaign through overextension. Tactically, Kraken exhibited adaptations to Imperial weapon patterns. Imperial Guard formations that relied on massed firing lines faced organisms that attacked through multiple layers, using tunneling broods, airborne assaults, and flanking bioforms. Naval commanders reported Tyranid void organisms that avoided direct exchange until conditions favored them, then struck in concentrated bursts. This suggested a hive mind willing to preserve assets when necessary, contradicting the earlier perception that Tyranids were only a mindless tide.
Kraken taught the Imperium that the swarm can economize force. A notable feature of Kraken's impact was its challenge to Space Marine doctrine. Space Marines are often deployed as rapid response forces, striking critical nodes, severing leadership, and breaking enemy cohesion. Against Tyranids, this approach met limits. Tyranid leadership is distributed through Synapse networks, and the battlefield contains countless living nodes. Even when Marines annihilated a Synapse organism, nearby creatures could compensate, and the swarm remained enormous. Kraken's dispersed invasion further diluted the Marines' effectiveness because they could not be everywhere. Their strategic value remained high, but their presence no longer guaranteed stabilization. Kraken also revealed the Tyranids' ability to conduct prolonged campaigns without collapsing. By feeding through successive worlds, the fleet sustained itself, and its tendrils could regroup after defeats. Imperial records emphasize that destroying a Tyranid force at one location often failed to eliminate it elsewhere, because other tendrils continued to advance. This forced the Imperium into a grinding defensive posture, spending fleets and armies across multiple fronts, while the Tyranids gained strength from every successful harvest. In historical perspective, Kraken transformed Tyranid threat assessment. Behemoth had been terrifying because it was massive. Kraken was terrifying because it was intelligent in method. It proved that the Hive Mind could change operational style to counter Imperial strengths. The Imperium faced not only an enemy that grows from consumption, but one that improves from contact. The lesson of Kraken was therefore strategic. Even if the Imperium survives each war, the Tyranids emerge more capable than before.
Hive Fleet Leviathan represents the most dangerous evolution of Tyranid strategy yet recorded by the Imperium. Where Behemoth relied on brute concentration and Kraken relied on dispersal, Leviathan combined mass, reach, and coordinated pressure across vast regions. Its approach patterns suggested a level of strategic planning that forced Imperial High Command to treat the Tyranid threat not as a border crisis, but as a structural danger to the entire galaxy. The resulting conflict is known as the Third Tyranid War, and it reshaped Imperial defenses on a scale comparable to major crusades. Leviathan's emergence confounded expectations. Instead of attacking from the same galactic edges as previous fleets, Leviathan advanced from beneath the galactic plane, striking upward into regions that had not prepared for direct Tyranid contact. This vector bypassed many conventional warning systems and threatened sectors that assumed distance was safety. The fleet's geometry appeared as a vast crescent of tendrils capable of enveloping multiple systems simultaneously. Imperial cartographers described its movement as predatory encirclement, a fleet designed to surround prey rather than simply charge it. The Third Tyranid War was defined by simultaneous disasters. Entire subsectors faced invasion at once. Reinforcement routes collapsed under the shadow in the warp. Local commanders were forced into independent decision-making with incomplete information. The Imperium's traditional solution, concentrating fleets for decisive engagement, became increasingly impractical. Leviathan punished any overcommitment by widening its assault elsewhere. It created a strategic environment where no front was secure, and every victory risked becoming irrelevant if another system fell. Leviathan also demonstrated refined adaptation in organism design. Imperial field reports describe swarms that displayed increased resistance to commonly deployed countermeasures. Worlds that relied on armored spearheads encountered bioforms designed to immobilize and dissolve vehicles.
Fortified lines were challenged by tunneling organisms and saturation assaults. Heavy infantry discovered that Tyranid attack patterns adjusted rapidly to defensive routines. Many defenders described a sense that the enemy was studying them, not as individuals, but as a system. Once a tactic was recognized, it was countered with new variants.
A major factor in the Third Tyrannic War was the scale of bioship presence. Leviathan's void organisms were deployed in immense numbers, enabling it to contest orbital space even against powerful Imperial fleets. Naval battles became brutal wars of attrition. Tyranid bioships absorbed catastrophic damage, yet continued to function, while Imperial ships suffered the familiar limitations of repair time and material supply. The fleet's capacity to grow replacement organisms from harvested worlds meant that even when Leviathan was bled, it could replenish itself faster than the Imperium could rebuild. The war also highlighted the Tyranids' interaction with psychic and strategic terrain. Leviathan's shadow in the warp was recorded as unusually oppressive, collapsing astropathic networks and intensifying panic across threatened regions. Many Imperial sectors discovered that their defense plans assumed communication that could no longer exist. The inability to coordinate produced cascading failures, evacuation orders delayed, reinforcement convoys misrouted, and local revolts ignited by fear. In some cases, worlds were lost before major armies even arrived, not because they lacked soldiers, but because they were cut off from coherent command. Leviathan's pressure forced the Imperium into extreme measures. Strategic doctrines expanded to include wider use of scorched earth and exterminatus to deny biomass. The role of Space Marines intensified as rapid strike units, but even their interventions became increasingly defensive, aimed at delaying consumption rather than achieving decisive reversal. The war was not fought for clean victory. It was fought to prevent irreversible collapse. Historically, Leviathan marks a grim threshold. It suggests that Tyranid fleets can vary not only in scale, but in strategic direction, striking from unexpected vectors and coordinating across immense distances. The Third Tyrannic War did not end the Tyranid advance. It revealed the galaxy's vulnerability. Leviathan was not only a fleet, it was a demonstration that the Hive Mind can reshape war itself. The wars between the Tyranids and the Adeptus Astartes have become defining case studies in Imperial military history. Space Marines represent the Imperium's most capable shock forces, genetically engineered, highly trained, and equipped with advanced war gear. Their doctrine is based on rapid, decisive strikes, disruption of enemy command, and overwhelming localized superiority. Against many foes, this produces victory disproportionate to numbers. Against the Tyranids, however, these principles encounter an adversary designed to resist disruption, absorb casualties, and replace losses through consumption. The central challenge is structural. Space Marine doctrine often seeks to decapitate enemy leadership. Against Orks, killing a war boss can collapse cohesion. Against human rebels, removing commanders can end a revolt. Tyranids do not rely on singular leadership. Their Synapse network is distributed. A Synapse creature may guide a local swarm, but the Hive Mind's strategic direction persists across innumerable nodes. Eliminating one leader may create temporary confusion, but it does not end the invasion. In many battles, Space Marines found themselves forced into attritional warfare, a form of warfare for which they are not naturally optimized.
Nevertheless, the Astartes remain among the most effective forces against Tyranids, precisely because they can adapt tactically and strike where conventional armies cannot. Their mobility allows targeted destruction of key synapse organisms, digestion infrastructure, and bioship landing zones. Their discipline enables sustained defense under psychological pressure that breaks ordinary troops. Their resilience allows them to fight in contaminated environments where Tyranid spores and toxins degrade human forces. When employed correctly, they do not attempt to destroy the entire swarm. They aim to fracture it, slow it, and deny it the ability to complete planetary consumption. The defense of Macragge during the First Tyrannic War stands as the most famous example. Ultramarines forces fought a prolonged campaign against Hive Fleet Behemoth, inflicting enormous casualties and preventing total devouring of their realm. The battle demonstrated the importance of layered defense, artillery coordination, and disciplined withdrawal rather than collapse. It also demonstrated the necessity of understanding synapse control. By prioritizing synapse creatures, the Ultramarines achieved moments of disruption that allowed counterattacks and regrouping. Yet the cost was staggering, proving that even the most capable chapter could be pushed near extinction.
Later wars produced further examples of hard-learned method. Many chapters developed specialized anti-Tyranid doctrines, aggressive reconnaissance to identify synapse nodes, reliance on flame and plasma weapons to counter biological resilience, and rapid redeployment to prevent the swarm from establishing digestion infrastructure. Terminator squads and veteran formations often played critical roles, holding choke points against overwhelming numbers and ensuring that defensive lines did not fracture under pressure. The Tyranids, however, adapted to Astartes' methods. Swarms began producing organisms specifically suited to hunting elite infantry. Some bioforms displayed speed and stealth intended to isolate marine squads. Others employed psychic disruption and massed biological artillery to force marines out of fortified positions. The Hive Mind learned to bait Astartes into costly engagements, flooding them with expendable organisms while heavier monsters struck elsewhere. This forced Space Marines into difficult choices: protect civilians and infrastructure at the risk of being pinned, or abandon ground to strike at synapse targets while allowing destruction behind them. A further complication is strategic scale. Space Marines are few, Tyranids are not. Even the greatest chapter cannot defend dozens of worlds simultaneously. Tyranid invasions deliberately exploit this limitation through multiple tendrils and distraction assaults. Astartes' forces may win decisive battles, yet still lose campaigns if the swarm feeds elsewhere. This has shaped Imperial doctrine toward coordination. Space Marines must act in concert with Imperial Guard, Navy, and planetary militias, serving as the decisive spear rather than the whole defense. In Imperial historical memory, Tyranid wars have altered the myth of the Space Marines. They remain heroes and symbols of salvation, yet the Tyranids have shown that heroism is not always enough. Against an enemy that treats casualties as food and defeat as data, even the Emperor's finest can be forced into retreat, containment, and sacrifice. The legacy of these defenses is therefore not triumphal, but instructional. They reveal how the Imperium survives, not by destroying the Tyranids entirely, but by enduring long enough to deny them complete consumption. The conflicts between Tyranids and Orks reveal one of the harshest truths of galactic warfare.
When two endlessly expanding war ecologies collide, the result is not a decisive battle, but a sustained catastrophe. Both forces are defined by relentless aggression, rapid replacement of losses, and a near total indifference to casualties. Yet their underlying nature differs. Orks are a self-propagating warrior species driven by cultural instinct and biological reproduction through spores. Tyranids are a directed, centralized predatory system that converts all organic matter into purposeful growth. Their wars, therefore, become tests of momentum, adaptation, and resource conversion. In early imperial thinking, it was tempting to assume that orks could function as a natural counterweight to Tyranid expansion. Orks fight anything, breed through conflict, and can absorb enormous losses without collapse. Tyranids, meanwhile, seek biomass and do not negotiate. At first glance, a clash between them appeared to promise mutual destruction. Imperial commanders sometimes even attempted to redirect one threat into the path of the other. In practice, the outcome was rarely stabilizing. Instead, Tyranid-Ork wars often created worse strategic environments because they generated immense battles that fed both forces. Orks thrive on war because it strengthens them socially and physically. Large battles create larger orks, elevate war bosses, and build momentum toward greater activity. Tyranids, in contrast, thrive on war because it supplies raw matter and tactical information. Every corpse is nutrient mass. Every defense pattern becomes evolutionary data. When orks and Tyranids fight, casualties are not a limitation, they are fuel. This creates a dynamic where neither side is easily exhausted and where escalation becomes likely rather than containment. The typical pattern begins with contact at the edge of a war zone. Orks respond to Tyranid presence with immediate mass assault, driven by instinctive attraction to large-scale fighting. Tyranids respond with layered consumption warfare, deploying swarms to absorb ork charges and heavier bioforms to destroy ork leadership concentrations. The battlefield quickly becomes saturated with bodies, spores, and debris. Tyranids attempt to harvest the dead, but orks continually produce more through spore release and reinforcements. This means Tyranids can gain biomass even without conquering worlds outright, while orks gain the sustained warfare environment they desire.
Imperial observers noted that Tyranids often display surprising caution in these wars. While they can overwhelm human armies through sheer weight, orks present a different risk profile. Ork numbers can expand rapidly, and their crude but effective technology can inflict significant losses. A direct, all-in Tyranid assault may lead to unacceptable expenditure before consumption structures are established. As a result, the hive mind may shift toward selective targeting, destroying ork leadership, disabling industrial zones, and using biochemical weapons to degrade ork reproduction potential. The hive mind treats orks as dangerous prey, not simple prey. Despite this, Tyranids retain one decisive advantage: conversion efficiency. Orks generate strength through warfare, but they do not systematically convert conquered ecosystems into fuel with Tyranid completeness. Tyranids consume at industrial scale. When they gain the upper hand and begin full planetary harvesting, ork populations can be transformed into nutrient reserves for further Tyranid growth. This turns a seemingly equal conflict into a long-term hazard for the galaxy. Orks can slow Tyranids, but they can also become the meal that strengthens them.
There is also an ecological interaction unique to these wars. Both Tyranids and Orks spread through spores, microbial contamination, and battlefield residue. Planets where they clash can become permanently unstable, with feral Ork populations and Tyranid remnants persisting long after major fleets depart. These worlds become toxic traps for Imperial reclamation efforts. Even when the Imperium survives the initial threat, it inherits a poisoned biosphere where conflict can reignite. In strategic assessment, Tyranid-Ork wars are not solutions, but accelerants. They create colossal violence that benefits both participants in different ways. The Imperium does not gain security from their collision. It gains time at best, and at worst, it gains a larger Tyranid fleet fed by Ork biomass and sharpened by endless combat.
The conflicts between Tyranids and Necrons reveal a rare case in which the Tyranid core advantage, biomass conversion, is sharply limited. The Necrons are not a living civilization in the ordinary sense. They are an ancient machine-based species whose bodies are metallic, whose armies do not depend on food or morale, and whose casualties can be repaired or reconstituted through arcane technological processes. For the Tyranids, this represents a fundamental problem. The Necrons offer far less edible value than biological prey, and their method of war is structured to deny the swarm its preferred reward. Imperial analysts classify Tyranid-Necron contact as strategically significant because it tests the limits of Tyranid expansion. The Tyranids are optimized to consume life. Necron worlds, especially tomb worlds, contain minimal surface ecosystems and vast underground infrastructure made of necrodermis and energy weapons. Even where living populations exist, Necron forces can purge them to deny the Tyranids' biomass. This creates an unusual form of resistance. The prey may destroy its own local food sources rather than allow Tyranid feeding. Necron combat doctrine further complicates Tyranid assault. Necron weapons are not simply lethal, many are disintegrative, reducing organic matter to ash or atomized fragments. This deprives the Tyranids of corpses for recycling and harvest. In wars against humans or Orks, Tyranid casualties are often reclaimed and reprocessed, reducing the strategic cost of loss. Against Necrons, losses can become true losses because bodies may be vaporized or rendered chemically unusable. This changes the attritional arithmetic in favor of the Necrons. Necron resilience is also structurally different. Tyranids rely on synapse networks to coordinate swarms. Necrons rely on command protocols, self-repair systems, and teleportation technologies that allow damaged units to phase out and return later. The battlefield therefore lacks the morale collapse that Tyranids exploit in organic enemies. Necron lines can hold without fear. Their formations can retreat without panic. Their commanders can execute complex plans without concern for psychological breakdown. For the Tyranids, this means that terror, intimidation, and exhaustion tactics have little effect.
These wars often become contests between adaptation and denial. Tyranids attempt to evolve bioforms resistant to Necron energy weapon profiles, while Necrons attempt to eliminate Tyranid organisms faster than they can adapt. Tyranid biology can produce thick armor, rapid regeneration, and specialized dispersal behaviors. But Necron technology can adjust targeting patterns, deploy area denial, and utilize weapons designed for mass annihilation. The result is a kind of Cold War of extermination, where neither side easily gains the decisive advantage available in other matchups.
A critical factor is the value of targets. Tyranids prioritize worlds rich in life. Necrons prioritize tomb worlds, dynastic infrastructure, and strategic control points. This can lead to divergent objectives. In some cases, Tyranids may avoid prolonged engagement with Necrons if alternative biomass sources are available. In others, Necrons may awaken in response to Tyranid incursions to defend their holdings, forcing contact regardless of Tyranid preference. Imperial records suggest that the Hive Mind recognizes Necrons as a costly opponent and may shift strategy accordingly, bypassing heavily defended tomb regions when possible. Yet the Tyranids possess one advantage even here: scale and persistence. Necron dynasties vary in strength and completeness of awakening. Some rise with full legions. Others awaken partially, their systems damaged by age. Tyranids can overwhelm incomplete Necron defenses through sheer mass, even if the nutritional reward is limited. They can strip surface ecosystems, devour living populations, and then depart, leaving Necron infrastructure intact but surrounded by dead worlds. This creates a strategic disaster for the galaxy. The Tyranids are not required to defeat Necrons fully to inflict irreversible damage on inhabited space. From the Imperial viewpoint, Tyranid-Necron conflict is not a salvation. It is a complicated threat interaction. Necrons can deny the Tyranids easy nourishment, but they cannot prevent them from consuming the galaxy's living worlds. The wars demonstrate that Tyranids are not invincible in every domain, yet they remain unstoppable in their central function, devouring life. If the Necrons are the skeleton of an ancient universe, the Tyranids are its predator. Their collision is not a resolution. It is a grim sign of how crowded and violent the end of the galaxy may become.
The relationship between the Tyranids and the forces of chaos is one of the most complex threat interactions in Imperial analysis. Both represent existential dangers to the Imperium, yet they operate according to radically different principles. Chaos is a phenomenon of the warp, a domain of psychic energy, emotion, and metaphysical predation. The Tyranids are a material superorganism, an extragalactic biological system driven by consumption and guided by a collective intelligence. Where chaos seeks corruption and spiritual collapse, the Tyranids seek only biomass. Their points of contact reveal the limits of both. At first glance, the Tyranids appear resistant to the defining weapons of chaos. They do not possess human-style ambitions, pride, or ideological vulnerability. Their organisms exhibit no individual desire to bargain, defect, or worship. This denies chaos one of its most reliable methods: seduction of minds through temptation. The Hive Mind's unity also suppresses the fragmentation that chaos exploits. A human army can be split by fear, jealousy, and despair. A Tyranid swarm does not experience these categories as individuals. It acts as a single predator system. As a result, chaos influence often fails to take root in Tyranid formations in the way it can among imperial populations. However, resistance is not immunity. Tyranids are deeply psychic in their own fashion. Their synapse network is sustained by warp-sensitive mechanisms, and the Hive Mind projects a massive psychic presence. This psychic activity creates overlap with chaos domains. When Tyranids and chaos forces clash, the battlefield becomes a zone where two different warp dynamics collide.
the oppressive, flattening shadow in the warp versus the turbulent, emotion-driven storms of chaos. Imperial astropaths describe such regions as violently unstable, with psychic pressure fluctuating between suffocation and eruption. One of the most important constraints is that Tyranids do not fully operate in the warp as humans do. They do not depend on warp navigation for interstellar logistics, and their void travel does not require the same psychic infrastructure as Imperial fleets. This limits Chaos' ability to disrupt Tyranid's strategic mobility. In contrast, Tyranids can degrade Chaos operations by suppressing warp resonance. The shadow in the warp can weaken demonic manifestation by making local warp conditions inhospitable. Demons are sustained by warp flow and psychic permeability. When the Tyranid field dominates, those conditions can become less favorable. This creates an unusual situation in which a Xenos invasion can indirectly act as an anti-warp pressure system.
Yet the Tyranids also face limits against Chaos, because Chaos does not provide the same rewards as organic prey. Demons are not stable biomass. They are warp entities whose bodies dissolve when banished. Even corrupted matter can be hazardous. Chaos-tainted worlds may contain living populations, but these environments are unstable, saturated with psychic phenomena that can disrupt synapse control and distort biological processes. The Hive Mind may still attack such worlds if biomass is available, but Imperial xenostologists suggest that these campaigns differ in character. Tyranid organisms may display altered behavior, increased aggression, or unusual mutation patterns when exposed to intense warp contamination. The conflict dynamic also depends on the type of Chaos force present. Against mortal Chaos armies, Tyranids fight as they do against any biological prey, with the added complication of warp-based sorcery and demonic reinforcement. Against fully demonic incursions, Tyranids may struggle to achieve their usual strategic end state because the enemy does not remain dead in a harvestable form. Tyranids can destroy physical anchors and banish manifested entities, but the battlefield yields limited nutritional benefit. In this sense, Chaos can deny the Tyranids their preferred profit, much as Necrons do, though by different means. There is a deeper implication in these interactions. Tyranids appear to possess a boundary condition. They are optimized for material conquest, not for metaphysical domination. They can suppress the warp locally through psychic pressure, but they do not reshape the warp into an empire of belief. Chaos is the inverse, powerful in the immaterial, unstable in the material. Their clashes therefore resemble a collision between two cosmic ecosystems, each strong in a different domain, neither capable of fully consuming the other. For the Imperium, this offers no comfort. It does not mean that Tyranids and Chaos cancel each other. It means their wars create zones of extreme devastation where Imperial forces are caught between incompatible horrors. Chaos can corrupt or annihilate worlds that Tyranids might otherwise consume. Tyranids can silence and isolate regions, weakening Imperial capacity to respond to chaos elsewhere. In the larger balance of galactic survival, the Tyranids demonstrate a terrifying principle. Even the warp, the Imperium's oldest nightmare, is not always the dominant predator. Sometimes the galaxy is threatened by something that does not hunger for souls, only for flesh. The Tyranid threat is expressed through bioforms, living organisms designed as tools of war. each bred for a specific function within the Hive Mind's invasion system. Imperial forces do not face a single enemy type, but a shifting catalog of creatures whose roles resemble infantry, armor, artillery, command units, and aircraft. This is not diversity for its own sake. It is an engineered order of battle, grown in response to tactical requirements and altered whenever the Hive Mind identifies new conditions. At the foundation of Tyranid ground forces are the Gaunts, especially Termagants and Hormagaunts. These creatures function as mass infantry. They are produced in enormous numbers, often deployed in the first wave to overwhelm firing lines, exhaust defenders, and seize ground through sheer saturation. Termagants typically provide ranged pressure through symbiotic weapons, living organisms that fire beetle-like projectiles, corrosive sacs, or other biological ammunition. Hormagaunts are optimized for speed and close assault, using leaping movement and scything limbs to tear through infantry positions. Their individual durability is limited, but their strategic value lies in volume and relentless momentum. Above Gaunts in complexity are Tyranid warriors, often described as the backbone of many swarms. Warriors combine resilience, versatility, and local synapse capacity. They can be equipped for ranged combat, close combat, or mixed roles, and they often operate as leaders for Gaunt broods. Their presence increases cohesion, discipline, and tactical direction. Warriors also illustrate Tyranid modularity. Their limbs and weapons can vary widely, allowing the Hive Mind to field configurations tailored to the battlefield. In Imperial reports, warriors are frequently linked to the swarm's ability to operate effectively, even amid heavy losses. The true command architecture of Tyranid forces is expressed through synapse creatures. These organisms project the Hive Mind's control and maintain behavioral stability across broods. When Synapse is strong, Tyranid forces act with coordinated intent, executing flanking maneuvers, disciplined retreats, and concentrated strikes. When Synapse is broken, lesser organisms may fall into predatory instinct, still lethal, but less strategically coherent. Key Synapse bioforms include hive tyrants, Tyranid primes, and zoanthropes, though the range of synaptic organisms is broader. Each provides not only command, but often specialized battlefield power, including psychic projection and resilience.
Hive tyrants are among the most feared. They function as high-level war commanders, directing major assaults and adapting strategy in real time. Their physical strength is matched by synaptic potency, allowing them to coordinate vast formations. Many carry wings for aerial dominance or heavy weapon symbiotes for ranged devastation. Imperial veterans describe the effect of a hive tyrant's presence as transformational. The swarm becomes more precise, more relentless, and more capable of exploiting small weaknesses. Zoanthropes and similar psychic organisms represent another dimension. They channel warp energy into destructive force and defensive shielding, while strengthening the synapse network. Their role is critical in battles where defenders rely on fortified positions and heavy weapons. A zoanthrope cluster can disrupt lines, crush armored units, and undermine morale through psychic pressure. Yet they are also vulnerable to focused fire, making them priority targets whenever Imperial forces can identify them in time. Beyond infantry and synapse units,
Tyranid warfare relies on monstrous bioforms, living weapons designed to break fortifications and destroy armored resistance. Carnifexes, often compared to battering rams of flesh, are bred for brutality and endurance. They crush defensive lines through direct impact, absorbing fire that would obliterate lesser organisms. Larger forms, such as Trigons and Molochs, add subterranean warfare, tunneling beneath defenses to erupt within rear lines. This forces defenders into constant vigilance, as no wall can be assumed secure when the ground itself becomes an enemy. At the apex of swarm structure are organisms of strategic scale, including biotitans and other massive entities. These creatures function as the Tyranids' equivalent of heavy siege engines, capable of annihilating strongpoints and reshaping entire battlefields. Their deployment is not random. It occurs when the Hive Mind concludes that psychological shock and structural destruction are required to accelerate collapse. Such organisms are rare compared to gaunts, but their presence can determine the outcome of planetary defense. The Tyranid order of battle therefore reflects a single principle. Every living form is a weapon, and every weapon is part of a coordinated ecosystem. The Imperium fights not an army, but a biological hierarchy, where the smallest creature has purpose and the largest creature acts as both terror and strategy made flesh.
Tyranid reproduction is not a natural process in the familiar biological sense. It is industrial, centralized, and inseparable from conquest. The Tyranids do not expand by settling worlds and raising offspring over time. They expand by harvesting planets, converting all usable matter into nutrient stock, and growing new organisms at scale. Imperial scholars therefore describe the Tyranid species not as a population, but as a production system, where war and reproduction are two sides of the same mechanism. At the core of this system lies the conversion of biomass. When a world is invaded, the swarm fights until resistance collapses, then begins full extraction. The dead are gathered first, including slain defenders and fallen Tyranids. Nothing is wasted. Corpses are transported toward digestion zones, where they are dissolved and separated into chemical components. As the invasion progresses, living populations are killed or captured and processed in the same manner. Entire ecosystems are stripped, from forests and grasslands to livestock, insects, and microbial life. This means the Tyranids do not merely kill life, they harvest its total biochemical value. The physical infrastructure for conversion is grown rapidly. Digestion pools function as biological refineries, breaking down matter into a dense nutrient slurry. Capillary towers act as pumping organs, drawing processed material upward into the atmosphere. Spore chimneys spread microbial agents that kill remaining life and accelerate decomposition, ensuring that even inaccessible biomass is reduced and made usable. On many worlds, oceans are partially drained, and the atmosphere itself is altered, as gases and organic compounds are captured for fleet use. The planet becomes a temporary factory dedicated to feeding the Hive Fleet. Once nutrient slurry reaches orbit, it is absorbed by bioships and redistributed. This is the moment reproduction becomes visible at strategic scale. New organisms are grown in vast numbers, using the harvested material as raw input. Damage to existing organisms is repaired through regenerated tissue.
void vessels can be regrown or strengthened. The fleet increases in mass and capability, not by building new factories, but by consuming and transforming prey worlds directly into expansion capacity.
Imperial analysis highlights a crucial concept. Tyranid reproduction is demand-driven. The hive mind produces what it requires, when it requires it. A campaign against armored prey increases the growth of anti-armor bioforms. A campaign against fortified worlds increases the production of siege organisms. A campaign against highly mobile defenders increases the growth of fast assault variants and aerial hunters. In this sense, reproduction is a strategic act, a deliberate response to the conditions of war. The Tyranids do not simply breed, they manufacture. This demand-driven reproduction is enabled by a genetic command structure centered on specialized breeding entities, commonly associated with the Norn queens. While direct observation remains limited, Imperial xenobiologists agree that these organisms function as genetic architects and production overseers. They receive the hive mind's requirements, incorporate newly harvested genetic templates, and design the next wave. This creates a closed loop. Invasion generates new genetic data. That data shapes future organisms, and future organisms improve the next invasion. The speed of this system is one of its greatest terrors. Imperial forces may win early battles, only to face modified organisms weeks later that resist the very weapons that secured those victories. A planet may hold a defensive line long enough to exhaust one wave, only to be attacked again by a new wave refined through battlefield observation. The Tyranids compress development cycles that would take other species centuries into the tempo of a single war. Resource conversion also shapes Tyranid strategic behavior. A hive fleet does not require stable supply chains. Its logistics are its targets. Every conquered world becomes fuel for the next stage of advance. This means Tyranid campaigns can remain self-sustaining as long as prey exists. For the Imperium, this creates a brutal calculation. A lost world does not merely fall, it strengthens the enemy that will attack the next world. Every failure compounds. Tyranid reproduction is therefore not an accessory to invasion. It is the invasion. The galaxy is their breeding ground, and war is their method of growth.
The Tyranids represent a strategic threat of a different category from all other enemies faced by the Imperium. Many threats seek control. Orks seek war and dominance. Chaos seeks corruption and spiritual conquest. Necrons seek dynastic restoration, and rival human powers seek territory or independence. These conflicts, however devastating, remain within a framework of political struggle. The Tyranids exist outside that framework. They do not want governance, they want conversion. Their victory condition is the removal of life and its transformation into more Tyranids. In the long term, this makes them not simply a hostile power, but a systemic extinction process. The danger lies in their self-reinforcing expansion. Tyranid warfare converts success into increased capacity. Each consumed world directly increases fleet mass, organism numbers, and the range of evolutionary options available to the hive mind. This creates a compounding effect. Early incursions may be resisted at immense cost, yet every planet lost increases the scale of future invasions. Unlike an empire that grows through conquest but must then garrison territory, the Tyranids carry their gains with them.
They do not leave behind populations that can rebel. They leave behind dead rock. Their expansion, therefore, has no stabilizing burden. For galactic civilization, this threatens not only political structures, but the material basis of life. Tyranid consumption removes atmospheres, biospheres, and oceans. Even if a planet is later reclaimed, it may be functionally uninhabitable. This is not destruction that can be reversed by rebuilding cities or restoring governance. It is ecological erasure. Over centuries, repeated Tyranid victories could reduce entire regions of the galaxy into barren zones, breaking trade routes, severing migration corridors, and eliminating the resource base needed for any civilization to function. The Tyranid threat also disrupts the psychic infrastructure of the Imperium. The shadow in the warp does not merely complicate battles, it weakens the ability of human civilization to remain unified. If communication fails, coordination fails. If coordination fails, defense becomes localized and reactive. Over time, this can fragment imperial space, causing worlds to become isolated, governors to act independently, and sectors to fall without reinforcements. In this way, Tyranids do not need to conquer the Imperium politically. They can cause it to disintegrate as an operational system.
The Imperium's reliance on static defense adds further vulnerability. Many worlds depend on fixed infrastructure, hive cities, fortress lines, orbital stations, and tithe chains. Tyranids exploit this. They do not care about city capture. They care about mass harvest. Dense populations become concentrated biomass. Industrial worlds become concentrated resource. Agri-worlds become fuel reserves. The Imperium's economic geography, designed for efficiency of tithe, becomes an ecological map of Tyranid opportunity. Long-term resistance, therefore, requires more than battlefield victory. It demands denial. Imperial doctrine increasingly treats certain worlds as sacrificial, to be destroyed rather than consumed. Exterminatus, once a rare and symbolic measure, becomes a strategic tool in Tyranid war. This reveals the moral and political cost of survival. To prevent Tyranid growth, the Imperium may choose to annihilate its own worlds, killing billions to deny biomass. This corrodes legitimacy, increases fear, and intensifies internal conflict. In this sense, the Tyranids weaken the Imperium even when they are not present, because their approach makes atrocity seem necessary. Other civilizations face similar long-term consequences. Eldar craft worlds and Exodite worlds rely on carefully preserved ecosystems, making Tyranid consumption an existential threat to their cultural survival. Ork empires may thrive temporarily on conflict, but even they risk becoming biomass for larger fleets. Necrons may resist consumption, yet they cannot protect living space at scale. Chaos can exploit Tyranid-created collapse, but chaos also depends on living minds to feed the warp. A galaxy devoured by Tyranids would be hostile even to chaos, because dead silence yields no worship, no fear, and no emotion. This is the ultimate long-term danger. The Tyranids are not merely one enemy among many. They are a mechanism that can end the conditions required for all other forms of power. If unchecked, they do not replace civilizations with Tyranid civilization. They replace them with nothing. As the Imperium's knowledge of the Tyranids expanded, one fear emerged repeatedly in strategic assessments: that the Hive fleets encountered so far may represent only the first edge of a far greater mass. This concern is not speculative paranoia. It is grounded in the observed scale of Tyranid operations and the logical requirements of their biology. Hive fleets such as Behemoth, Kraken, and Leviathan have already demonstrated the capacity to threaten entire sectors. Yet the Tyranids behave as a species that spends biomass to gain biomass, growing as they advance. If these fleets were able to reach the Milky Way and sustain multiple catastrophic wars, it implies a larger source ecology able to generate and dispatch them. The extragalactic origin hypothesis strengthens this fear. If the Tyranids truly come from beyond the galactic rim, then their presence is not confined to the Milky Way. It suggests they have moved through intergalactic void before, possibly consuming other galaxies or regions of space. Such migration would require enormous reserves and long-term coordination. The Hive Mind would need to sustain a vast population across distances that dwarf Imperial comprehension. The Imperium's ability to survey deep void is limited. Even the Astronomicon does not provide full visibility beyond the rim. In this darkness, the Tyranids could be approaching in numbers that cannot be measured until they arrive. There are also troubling signs in Tyranid behavior itself. Hive fleets do not always commit fully to battles, even when doing so might secure quick consumption. In some engagements, they withdraw tendrils, bypass targets, or shift direction in ways that suggest long-term planning. This implies that the Hive Mind is managing resources at a scale beyond immediate feeding. It may be probing the galaxy, testing defenses, and mapping strategic pathways for future exploitation. In this interpretation, the wars endured so far are not the main event. They are reconnaissance through slaughter.
The Imperium has attempted to model the Tyranid threat through fleet mass estimates. Such models are inevitably uncertain, but they produce a disturbing conclusion. If Hive fleets continue to arrive over time, the Imperium cannot win through attrition. Imperial industry is vast, but it is politically fractured and burdened by constant war on multiple fronts. The Tyranids, by contrast, can theoretically expand indefinitely as long as prey exists. If larger fleets arrive, or if multiple fleets converge in coordination, even the Imperium's greatest fortresses may be overwhelmed simply by scale. The concept of a greater swarm is also reinforced by the possibility that the Hive Mind operates beyond the galaxy's edge as a continuous entity. The Hive Mind observed within the Milky Way is immense, but it may not represent the full consciousness. It may be only the portion expressed through the fleets present. If so, then the true Hive Mind may extend beyond the rim in a concentration of power far greater than Imperial psychers have yet encountered. The shadow in the warp may deepen as larger masses approach, potentially creating zones where warp travel becomes impossible across vast regions. This would not merely hinder defense, it could isolate entire sectors permanently, leaving them to be devoured in sequence. From a historical viewpoint, this fear transforms Tyranid chronology into an unfolding countdown. Each Hive fleet is not simply a war, it is a data point. It indicates that the galaxy has been detected, that routes have been opened, and that the predator is now feeding. Predators do not stop once feeding begins. They expand into the richest hunting grounds until those grounds are exhausted. The Milky Way, with its dense worlds and endless life, is such a ground. In Imperial strategic language, the possibility of greater fleets yet to arrive is the darkest uncertainty.
It means that even if present invasions are contained, the future may bring something beyond capacity. It means that every victory may be only delay, and it means that the Tyranids, as a phenomenon, may not be an invasion at all. They may be the beginning of an arrival that cannot be stopped once it has begun.
The Tyranids force the galaxy to confront a final grim possibility, that the struggle against them is not a conventional war, but resistance against an end state. Many threats in Imperial history, no matter how terrible, still exist within cycles of rise and decline. Empires fall and are replaced. Wars destroy and later rebuild. Even chaos and rebellion, though endless, preserve the existence of living societies that continue to fight. The Tyranids offer something different. Their victory does not produce a new order, it produces absence. In strategic terms, the Tyranids embody total consumption. Their invasions do not merely kill populations, they remove biospheres. They strip worlds of oceans and atmospheres. They convert organic complexity into raw nutrient mass to grow again. Each conquered planet becomes a dead husk, and each dead husk becomes fuel for further advance. This means the Tyranids represent not only a military danger, but a cosmological one. They act like a biological reset mechanism, converting living diversity into one expanding predator ecology. From a historical perspective, the Tyranids challenge the concept of civilization itself. Civilizations assume continuity. They assume that even defeat leaves ruins, survivors, and memory. Tyranid warfare erases these foundations. A consumed world leaves no rebuilding, no recovery, no inherited culture. When the Tyranids finish, there is no society left to mourn. There is no ecology left to sustain refugees. There is only sterile stone. This is why Imperial analysts increasingly describe the Tyranids not as a rival power, but as a force of extinction. The Hive Mind's role reinforces this existential framing. The Tyranids are not chaotic in behavior, they are directed. Their violence is purposeful, and their purpose is consistent across fleets, centuries, and fronts. This is not an enemy that can be deterred through diplomacy, ideology, or fear. It cannot be bribed, it cannot be exhausted emotionally, it cannot be divided politically, it cannot be subverted by propaganda. Its motives are simple as they are absolute: feed, evolve, expand. This makes the Tyranid threat uniquely stable. It does not depend on historical conditions. It does not collapse with leadership change. It persists as long as life exists to be consumed.
The Tyranids also reshape the galaxy's strategic environment by forcing other powers into distortion. The Imperium becomes more willing to annihilate its own worlds rather than lose them. This fuels despair, rebellion, and internal collapse. Xenos civilizations respond with increasingly desperate measures: isolation, migration, or preemptive destruction. Even chaos faces a paradox because it thrives on living emotion, yet a devoured galaxy would offer no souls to corrupt and no minds to haunt. In this sense, the Tyranids destabilize the entire ecosystem of galactic conflict, not by aligning with one faction, but by threatening the underlying conditions that allow any faction to exist. The ultimate existential question is scale. If the Tyranids represent a predator ecology that has already consumed beyond the Milky Way, then their presence is not exceptional, it is a pattern. It suggests a universe in which life, once abundant enough, eventually draws the attention of an apex consumer that converts diversity into singularity. In that scenario, the Tyranids are not merely one more xeno-species, they are the expression of a universal logic that life can become its own greatest predator, evolving into a form that devours all competitors and then moves on. For the Imperium, this interpretation is intolerable, yet strategically relevant. It implies that the Tyranids may not be stoppable through local victory, because local victory does not address the larger movement. It implies that the wars fought so far are defensive contractions against an expanding frontier of hunger. It implies that even the Imperium's greatest achievements, its crusades and fortress worlds, are ultimately temporary barriers against a tide that does not tire. And yet, the galaxy still fights, not because victory is assured, but because survival demands it. The Tyranids define the outer limit of what a civilization can endure. They reveal that the final enemy may not be hatred, heresy, or ambition, but consumption without meaning. In that light, the Tyranids become the darkest mirror of life itself, an organism that has shed culture, memory, and identity, leaving only the drive to grow by feeding on everything else. This is why Imperial chronicles increasingly treat the Tyranids as an existential horizon. They are not simply the greatest Xenos threat of the age, they are the possibility that the galaxy's story ends not with conquest, but with silence.